Heritage Education Network Belize Culture Symposium, Community Issues and Innovative Practices. Make sure you join with our Facebook and YouTube. I want to there, you better there.
All we know that you are there.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our viewers, our friends, and our supporters across the globe. And welcome back to our second and final day of the fourth annual Culture Symposium. My name is Sylvia Bate, and I am one of the directors here at Heritage Education Network Belize. I have the absolute pleasure of being your host for part of this morning, most of this morning, and you will see my other co-directors throughout the day as well. We want to start off our second day of our Culture Symposium by expressing our sincere gratitude to the special guest moderator we had yesterday, Dr. Ale Villarreal, and to our IT support, Mr. Marco Vasquez, and to Ms. Nadimi, and to all of our communities of supporters who have made this symposium possible. A big thank you to all of you. As some of you might know, C.U.L.C.H.A is an acronym for Keeping Up with Language, Culture, Heritage, and Arts. Today, we will pivot a bit more from the focus on archaeology, history, and heritage we had yesterday to focus more on modern day issues, lived realities, and of course, the cultural and creative industries, our orange economy. Although yesterday's topics are certainly just as relevant to modern day issues and to the orange economy, and we will explore those intersections today, as an organization that is centered around heritage, we always take the opportunity to highlight the importance of understanding the past to making sense of our current world and the plans that we have and create for our future. We hope that all of the presentations from yesterday have helped to highlight this and that they will continue to do so today. Our first session this morning will focus on legacies of Indigenous Maya communities in Belize and how communities are self-identifying, how they are affirming, and how they are negotiating expressions of self and culture within our wider Belizean society. We are absolutely excited to hear more about the intersections between technology and language, and of course, cultural preservation that is being explored and used today. To wrap up the morning session, we further explore cultural and Indigenous heritage and identities. We will take a look at the many efforts that our fellow Belizeans are making to create thriving and resilient communities through agency and self-determination. We are honored to feature this work that is so fundamental to maintaining and growing the social and cultural resilience of Belize. Following our lunch break, we have an exciting session exploring Belize's diverse, sustainable orange economy. We will explore the cultural and creative industries, art, film, and delve into how these industries are being leveraged to build sustainable communities through the cultural and creative industries. In our last session, we will explore the intersections between Indigenous Maya heritage and the creative or orange economies. This will center the role of Indigenous histories and sciences and the wider conversation of shaping the orange economy and building resilient and culturally sensitive products. This session will also give us a newfound appreciation and understanding of the orange economy and how we can continue to create spaces for agency and self-determination of Indigenous persons and communities. We truly believe that there is something for everybody today, so we hope that you will stay with us for the entirety of the sessions. But if for whatever reason you cannot, we also want to remind you that all of these streams, as well as the individual presentations, will be available on the Heritage Education Network Belize social media channels, both on Facebook and on YouTube. So follow us for more information in the coming days, weeks, and months, and hopefully years. This is our fourth symposium. As we continue to build these conversations around culture, around heritage, around language and the arts, and what is culturally relevant for us in Belize today. We appreciate the community that you are helping us build and sustain. And we look forward to growing a flourishing of appreciation for Belize's culture and heritage. And with that, I welcome you again to day 2 of our Culture Symposium, and we will transition into the first session for this morning. Our first presenter is very well known within Belize. Mr. Delmer Tsib is a history lecturer and coordinator of the Intercultural Indigenous Language Institute at the University of Belize. He is very passionate about history research, decolonization, and history education. Mr. Tib possesses a bachelor's degree in social sciences with a major in history and a diploma in educational methodology from the University of Belize. He also holds a master's degree from the University of South Pacific and is a PhD student currently in education at UNICAF University. Delmer's research focuses on decolonizing education, community history, migration, and oral histories. He has over 11 years of teaching experience at the high school and university level, and he has participated in national projects for curriculum development, public history, oral history, and cultural revival. His research interests include Belizean history, of course, community histories, subaltern studies, gender and migration studies, and of course, indigenous knowledge and language. We now move into his presentation, The Decline of People Identifying as Yucatec Maya in Belize.
As Delmer Sib, I am a history lecturer at the University of Belize and also an active cultural activist as it relates to the Yucatec Maya identity, particularly in Western Belize. Today I'm going to be talking about a decline of the Yucatec Maya population in Belize. Primarily, the topic relates to looking at the census data and trying to examine what causes or what factors led to the decline of people identifying as Yucatec Maya of Belize. It is worth noting that our experiences in Belize are very different in different places as to how is it that people are using the terminologies to identify as Yucatec Maya and what certain expressions, cultural expressions, languages, and so on they use to connect to a particular group. It is also worth noting that the label of Yucatec Maya was a terminology that was adopted in the 2000s, and there are still people in different communities that are identifying as Santa Cruz or K.U.L.C.H.A or the Cocoms groups that were within the Yucatan region. I'm going to be going deeper into this discussion as we go along, but I wanted to start today's discussion with looking at this particular image. Some time ago, a group called Another Beautiful Day in San Antonio, of which I am part of, held a retreat. This retreat included youths, middle-aged persons, and also elders. And part of the discussion that we had was that we are understanding or observing, I should say, that cultural traditions, people identifying as Yucatec Maya, and even the language had been waning in the communities for a considerable time. It has been declining for so many years, and we realize that if we don't do something about it, it will disappear. So part of that discussion is what I'm going to be presenting today, looking at some of the factors that were discussed and identified as key elements that had been or have been contributing to the decline of people identifying as Yucatec Maya. So today I want to be focusing on three different aspects. I want to first of all look at the census data to understand what are some of the trends of the Yucatec Maya population in Belize. This particular analysis I think is very important so that we look at how the census is representing or how people are identifying, I should say, as Yucatec Maya over the years. It is important, as much as there are criticisms about the census data being inaccurate, I think that it provides a high level or an indication at least of where our populations stand. In this case, it's important that we problematize it, that we understand what is it that is happening and where is it that it is happening. Where are people not identifying as Yucatec Maya, and how is it that they're negotiating and understanding their identity? The second element of my discussion focuses on at least looking at two factors that influence the decline of the Yucatec Maya in Belize. This is primarily focused or based on, as I had mentioned prior, that retreat that occurred on the Another Beautiful Day committee's retreat. Some of these ideas was bounced off as to perhaps some of the causes and trends of what has been occurring in our communities. And the second aspect to it is that this also based on secondary literature review. I want to state that I am not going to be trying to explore every single factor that leads to the decline of the Yucatec Maya population in Belize. Rather, I will just explore it in a very general term so that we can have a level of orientation to it. And lastly, we're going to break down at least two efforts that help to promote Yucatec Maya identity in Belize. With the aim of this presentation is really, or the central aim of this presentation is really to explore, cause more discussion and debate perhaps on what is happening in the communities, Yucatec Maya communities in Belize, and for us to start to generate solutions to these issues, because as we speak, the language is disappearing, different bodies of knowledge are disappearing, knowledge of herbs, knowledge of spirituality, knowledge of construction. All of these indigenous knowledge systems are disappearing, if we don't make a conscious effort to rescue um, some of these knowledge systems, we are going to be losing it. And for me, it starts with being proud of being Yucatec Maya and being proud of sharing the knowledge, sharing the language, and sharing the pride and sharing the joy of being Yucatec Maya. Although we can have perhaps a more robust discussion on what it means to be Yucatec identity or to be Yucatec in Belize, I know that it's also a question that perhaps may have an answer or perhaps it may not have an answer, because what does it mean to be Yucatec Maya in the western part of Belize may be different from what it means to be Yucatec Maya in the northern part of Belize, as opposed to people that live in Mexico and Yucatan. So I don't want to get into that particular discussion. And I do want to sort of state that I am very conscious that we cannot cast these homogeneous definitions of Yucatec or any identity perhaps, because it's important to note that some of these expressions, practices, and so on have been changing as it relates to historical times and also to sociological spaces. So even when we say we are Yucatec Maya, there are certain elements that are different for me as it relates to understanding myself as Yucatec as opposed to different other people. However, there is particularly an identification as Yucatec that we must consider and also explore within the context of Belize. Why Yucatec Maya? It is worth noting that the terminology Yucatec Maya is actually a term that was used in the census in the year 2000. It's something sort of that sprung about after consulting people about how they would like to be included within the census, that they began to use the term Yucatec. However, it is worth noting that there were different groups that inhabited the area. You have the K.U.L.C.H.A. In fact, even up to today, you have some people in northern Belize who would say, I am a K.U.L.C.H.A. Maya, I am Santa Cruz Maya, and they would hold on to that particular identity. Others in the West would say that they're Itza Maya. However, now they are sort of used, the statement that is used to identify them is Yucatec Maya. And primarily this is used because of the area where they originated and where they basically were forced to migrate from. The Yucatec Maya originated in the Yucatan Peninsula in what is present-day Mexico as a result of the K.U.L.C.H.A. War, which started in 1847. When the war exploded, when the confrontation started, different groups of people were seeking refuge in different areas in Central America. And you have, of course, them migrating to the northern parts of Belize, Corozal, or Injuac, and also to the west. So you have areas like Benque, San Jose Socots, San Antonio, Bully Tree, Cristo Rey, having groups that originated in the Yucatan area. What is worth noting, though, is that particularly for the case of San Antonio and some villages in the northern part of Belize, they identify themselves as Maya Masewal. Maya Masewal is basically a term that is used to refer to peasants. It has Nawa origin, but it was adopted by the Yucatec Maya to mean us. And this particularly was a terminology that was adopted to question and to challenge, but not only challenge, but reject the terminology of Indian, right? They did not want to be called Indian. As a result of that, they adopted the terminology Maya Masewal. So as we speak, there are a number of Yucatec Maya who seek to be associated with Masewal rather than any other terminology around. The oral accounts documented by Mr. Alfonso Zul in his history of San Antonio basically indicate that leaders within Maya communities in Yucatan identified able men and put them in charge of small groups and sent them to leave the war zone. One of the reasons for this was so that they could safeguard the lineage of the Maya in the region. Obviously, the war affair was occurring. There was an attempt to basically erase some of the Maya population in the Yucatan region. As a result of that, this was a strategy that they used for survival. In fact, Alfonso Zul shares in his book that the Masewals of San Antonio related the experiences to their children in tears. And this book was published in the 90s, in the 90s. And what you notice here is that the stories were being passed on from one generation to the other. People that he interviewed were obviously remembering that story of the K.U.L.C.H.A, remembering the experiences of their ancestors or their grandparents or even parents. Yet, what occurred? Now, if you speak in the community of San Antonio about the K.U.L.C.H.A, you would not get a lot of responses to it because there's limited orientation to it. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why we have such a low number of people identifying as Yucatec Maya. But what you see here is that that aspect of oral history, sharing a story, was an important aspect that has been being lost over the years. Before I get into the census data, I want to highlight that the state, and when I mean the state in this case, we are referring to both the colonial and post-colonial terminologies used to refer to different groups. In this case, by 1861, the Maya populations of Belize were grouped into Indians. Eventually, by 1946, you notice that the census data catalogs them as American Indians. By 1970, Amerindians. By 1970, you also notice that you have the arrival or rise of usage of Maya and K.U.L.C.H.A. Now, what is important to note here is that Maya in this case was grouping basically everyone else that was not K.U.L.C.H.A. So even today, you notice that some people some Mopan Maya would say, well, I am Maya, not say Mopan Maya. So these are some of the intricacies that occur whenever you speak to some people. Then by 1991, you notice that the census data puts terminologies such as Mopan Maya, K.U.L.C.H.A Maya, and other Mayas. So these terminologies, again, are being used in the census data to refer to the different groups of Maya people in Belize. And it is not until 2000 that you have the three different groups that we have today, right? The Mopan, K.U.L.C.H.A, and Yucatec. I know the spelling for K.U.L.C.H.A may be different here, but this is how it appears in the census data. So what you see here is that as of 2000, you have that category being Yucatec in Belize. And when you look at the census data of 1991 and 2000, you notice that you have 1991 in particular, if you look at it, you notice that you have Maya K.U.L.C.H.A, Maya Mopan, and Maya Other. Right? So this is grouping everybody else together. The numbers here indicate at least for the Maya Ada, which we are presuming the Yucatec Maya were part of, including 5,686. Of course, this may include other groups that were present in Belize. By 2000, you have the origin or the first usage of the terminology Yucatec Maya. In this case, Yucatec Maya is used, and you see that 3,155 persons identify themselves as Yucatec Maya. In this case, it represented 1.4% of the population. So what you see occurring here is that you have 3,155, and I want us to keep that number in mind because this was the first time when the term Yucatec was being used. By 2010, you notice that Yucatec Maya, you only have 2,869 individuals identifying themselves as Yucatec Maya. Predominantly, you will notice that the dominant districts where the Yucatec Maya are located or were located in 2010 are the Cayo district with 1,699 and the Corozal district with 590. Orange Rock, actually the Belize district comes third with 279, and Orange Rock would come fourth with 226. And to a lesser extent, you have Toledo and the Stand Creek districts. But what you see here is that instead of increasing, you notice that there is a decline in people identifying as Yucatec Maya. In this case, this is obviously something that something is affecting it, because most of the groups are increasing their numbers. Obviously, you have people getting married and so on. And perhaps one of the reasons is that people are intermarrying, and their children are also not identifying as Yucatec, or identifying as another group. So those are factors that perhaps we should be exploring at a future point. By 2022, it is worth noting that you see that 2,160 persons identified as Yucatec Maya in Belize. Of that number, predominantly the Yucatec Maya continue to be in the Cayo district. You see that Corozal continues to be the second dominant area, and Orange Rock, which significantly declined, continue to be the third area where, well, actually the Orange Rock overtook Belize district to become the third, but still with a lower number. So what you see happening here is that the population is declining and something is happening. In addition to that, another indicator that we must explore is the languages or people that are able to speak the language. In fact, some people would use the language as a meter of identity. So if you could speak the language, then you are a Yucatec Maya. If you can't, then perhaps you're not. Some people would do that. But even so, you notice that only 1,822 speakers of Yucatec Maya are left in Belize. Of that, you also see a concentration in the Cayo district. You also see that Corozal continues to be the second dominant area as it relates to people that are able to speak the Yucatec Maya language. One of the explanations as it relates to the decline of the Maya in Belize or Yucatec Maya in Belize is that of globalization. Obviously, you have different languages that are becoming way more dominant. So you have English, for example, the language that I am using to make this presentation, Spanish, who are considered to be more useful, quote unquote, more useful, are dominating in many communities, and their influence goes beyond just formal education, but also within different households. So some parents are choosing to train their children to perform better in school, to know English from very, very early. And part of that it also means that they sacrifice the Yucatec Maya language in that process. So that's one of the elements that we need to look at. You also have the influence of global media. Obviously, the world it's changing. You have a dominance of Western media as well, and that is influencing a lot of our people to shift away from traditional practices. In addition to that, you also have assimilation and integration that is happening. And part of that is also influencing the loss of traditional knowledge and the loss of language. So, in many communities, for example, you will note that elders are not passing on the language for several reasons to the younger generation. But it's also worth noting that indigenous groups are not just dormant agents receiving globalization. Different groups have been adapting in different ways too. Um, Perhaps adopt some aspects of globalization to teach the culture, teach the language. For example, you have a Facebook page, the Belize Yucatec that is run by Andy Chuk, that uses technology, uses some modern tools to see how the Yucatec Maya culture is shared. In addition to that, as I had started off my presentation with, culture has been evolving. So obviously you have certain groups adopting certain practices and making it theirs for them to explore and see how they could safeguard the identity, language, and culture. There is also a deeper quest. In fact, when the census data was shared, and it came very blatant that the Yucatec Maya population is declining. One of the users of Facebook posted this data, and what you notice there is that the response that you saw on Facebook by mixed groups, right? You have some elders, you have some youths commenting about what is the potential issue for it. One of the central themes that I noted is that many pointed at the idea that many of the Yucatec Maya are identifying as mestizo. One of the things here to note is that um, you see that that terminology is used, the term mestizo, to the mixture of two groups. And whenever people are intermarrying, the new terminology used for them would be mestizo. That, at least that's the assumption that is being made in some of these commentaries that I saw. But of course, it sort of also pointed to the whole idea of being ashamed of being Yucatec Maya, the whole idea of mixtures that are occurring, and also a potential other factor would be the migration of people. But in this case, one of the other ideas that came about was that there is miseducation in Belize, and that's perhaps a concept that we could explore further on. But for the purposes of our discussion, it's important to note that this whole idea of identifying as mestizo as opposed to Yucatec Maya is an issue that is growing in the communities. And there has to be a way of addressing what really determines each of these groups and how we should be negotiating. Now, I am not saying that identifying as mestizo is a bad thing, right? But I do think that we need to explore what is happening as it relates to people identifying as mestizo as opposed to Yucatec Maya. Um, One of the other factors that I think came very strong within the discussions that we had, and also comes within the literature, is that the colonial education system left legacies that also prompted uh, perhaps a very late awakening of identification and indigenous rights per se. In this case, you notice that the colonial project was very, very much focused on educating people for particular posts, not necessarily for an orientation towards Belize as a first thing. And of course, as an orientation towards identity and knowing yourself and traditions and so forth. So the church state system also had something to do with this, where for some churches, they closed their door to some aspects of Yucatec Maya traditions. And obviously, it was not until the 70s that you have an awakening of a Belizeanization of the curriculum. But even this Belizeanization had only small aspects of connecting to the Maya heritage and African heritage in Belize. This is an ongoing process of decolonization that continues to happen in Belize. But what you see here is that some of these colonial narratives, Western ideas that basically discredit Yucatec Maya identity and demonize some of the practices are aspects that continue to linger around in our communities. So how do we address them? As I had mentioned, I am involved in another beautiful day in San Antonio committee in the village of San Antonio, K.U.L.C.H.A. And one of the discussions that is very important to have is how do we address the issues or our deficiencies? The Another Beautiful Day in San Antonio committee is basically a grassroots organization that is looking at promoting the culture in different ways, through games, through linguistic competitions, through promoting history, to highlighting the community spirit and community ambience. So these are perhaps strategies that we must be engaging to see how we develop a deeper connection. Part of this discussion also must include a connection to the archaeological sites that are within our communities. People need to understand and connect to their heritage, as well as understand, the different aspects of the Yucatec Maya identity, both in Belize and in other regions. It's also worth noting that the Another Beautiful Day in San Antonio committee provides various opportunities for people of the community and beyond. But the central idea here is to promote that pride for being a Yucatec Maya, and promote and encourage the youth in particular to figure out a way of connecting to their Maya roots. Part of this entails also looking at digital tools, looking at campaigns that include not only community activities, but on social platforms, creating videos and so on to educate and also share the knowledge. So this is a picture, and the whole idea is, again, we come back to the retreat. How do we build community? And here is also a picture of a public speaking competition that occurred, and part of that public speaking competition enhanced the students, primarily primary school students, to talk the language and share some words in Yucatec Maya to promote the identity and to, as you can see there, share the pride in me, Yucatec Maya. So this basically concludes my presentation. I know that perhaps due to time, I need to conclude. And also, I would like to leave you with the whole notion that, something is happening in our communities. We need to first accept that the decline is happening, and second, we need to act on it. If you are of any group, of any ethnicity, and if you want to work to revive culture, I encourage you to do so. It is very needed. We are looking at the root lines of our.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delmer Sib, not only for delving into Yucatec Maya identities in Belize, but that call for action to all Belizeans and all persons, not only in Belize, but in the diaspora, who might be interested in contributing to the important work that is occurring when it comes to the preservation of our cultures and the different forms of expressions of our cultures. I am sure there are plenty questions about this topic, Delmer. And speaking of questions, we would like to remind our audience that the question and answer segment is scheduled for the end of each session. So please put your comments or questions for our presenters in the comment sections on Facebook or on YouTube. Our presenters can see these questions. And the question and answer segment for this morning will start around 10 o'clock. So get your questions in before then. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Delmersib. We now move into our next presentation by Ms. Leslie Villegas. Ms. Villegas is a dedicated researcher and advocate for culturally sensitive technological integrations with a focus on Belize's diverse cultures. Her work involves collaborating with local communities in Belize to understand their unique needs and perspectives on digital technologies. She is a Watson Fellow through Connecticut College and has partnered with organizations like the San Ignacio Santa Elena House of Culture and NB to support cultural preservation while understanding the current technological resources that are at hand in Belize. Her studies in computer science, coupled with a passion for anthropology, drive her commitment to fostering sustainable development and inclusive technologies development that respects and enhances Belizean cultural heritage. We will now hear Building Bridges, culturally sensitive technology integration in indigenous and rural communities.
My name is Dulce Villegas. I am a recent graduate from Connecticut College. I'm currently on a fellowship studying in different countries and researching how technology can be more inclusive and accessible to rural and indigenous communities. And so today's presentation is called Building Bridges, Culturally Sensitive Technology Integration in Indigenous and Rural Communities. So some of the topics I'll be discussing is like the inspiration for this project and the opinions that have been formed around um, technology inclusivity in indigenous and rural communities, the guiding questions that I'm using to help me develop my research. I'll be touching base on language and cultural endangerment and also the technological approaches that are being used to address these issues. And within that, some of the issues that I've been able to identify in the current approaches to technology, whether that be for these technological solutions, but also what technology development looks like and how we cannot just apply the same piece of technology to every problem that we find. And I'll finish off with findings in Belize and what I've been able to see and how my perspective on technology has changed ever since I've gotten here. So, my inspiration for this project actually started based on my family's heritage. My family comes from Oaxaca, Mexico, and my mother's grandfather spoke Mixtec. However, he refused to actually pass down the language to my grandmother and my mother on the basis that they would be shunned by our community and that they would be made fun of for speaking improper Spanish. Um, but he did pass down some of his knowledge to my mom, translated into Spanish. However, I do sometimes wonder like how much of the knowledge that he did have could not be passed down because of this known thing that languages can't just be translated from one language to another, and a lot of languages carry unique ways of thinking. So it's something that I do think about sometimes. It wasn't until like college that I actually got the opportunity to understand what having a great grandfather that spoke Mishtik and had all of this knowledge, what that actually meant for my family and I. I feel like majority of my education in the United States was based on like learning facts about the United States and all of that. But I was actually given the opportunity to learn about myself for the first time in college. And I met this wonderful professor, Professor Bennett, who actually allowed me to find resources that helped me understand what anthropology is like and how to combat those bad perspectives of anthropology and sort of shape it to understand myself and communities better. At the same time, I was also touching a little bit on computer science, and I realized that you can make programs and pieces of technology and resources for a lot of communities worldwide with just a piece of program. So I have this really passionate thing where I like to help people, and I saw that this was something that would help me help others, but I wanted it to be more sensitive and I wanted to be more inclusive of people. So I decided to combine both anthropology and computer science. And that led me to the Watson Fellowship, which helps me become a better advocate for person-centered ways of developing information communications technologies based on the use of cultural preservation and catering to different cultures. Instead of making people cater to technology, I think we're the ones developing these pieces of technology that can actually help others and not make them have to change for anything. So, some of the opinions that have been circulating around ICT and technology in indigenous rural areas has to do with access to technological resources. So, how do these communities actually come to play with these game changing pieces of information and communication technologies and what that would look like? So, some people actually think that communities would be better off if they adopted full scale adoptions of digital devices, while others believe that the community themselves should determine at what pace and how much they want technology to be incorporated in their community. I think, from my understanding so far, that it should be a collaboration between the community and the partnership or whatever organization is there to help them access these resources. It should be a collaboration so that they can advocate for themselves on what they need and the issues that they're seeing, but also be educated on what is out there as a possible solution. So, therefore, allowing the community to decide how much technology can be incorporated into their members' lives. And so, the guiding questions that are helping me understand how technology is being used in these aspects are like, how can cultural values shape technological developments rather than making people adapt to technology, making the technology adapt to people in different cultures. How does technology influence cultural practices and traditions in the long run, and actually paying attention to those underlying issues that may arise after. So, I also want to see more about how technology adds to endangerment of languages and culture, which we are seeing through globalization and like pushing modernization onto these types of communities. So I think I actually want to know, how do communities integrate technology into daily lives, whether that would be like through agricultural technology or through digital devices in order to communicate with others. Like actually paying attention to how the community is currently using technology to benefit themselves and growing from there. Um, so yeah, currently I say that technology is pushing more towards endangerment of languages and culture because the dominant language on the internet is English, and so it does push this narrative that other languages are less used in the world. I would say because often community members see that their language are less useful, um, believing that the value only comes within their own community, as no one else outside that community would speak it. But if we're able to make technology more inclusive of different languages by allowing them to actually speak them or type them out into different posts or use like the same way that we use English, we can make it so that people see more value of their culture and their language in the world. And so, this lack of representation of indigenous languages in technology is an issue. So, some of the technological approaches that are being used to help with the endangerment of languages and cultures is by making it more inclusive, has to do with First Voices keyboard that was developed in May of 2016. And so this allows for people to create information and knowledge in their own language rather than relying on them to translate it into English so that the whole world can understand. Um, so some specializations on the keyboard are made so that you can be able to send emails, social media posts, word processing, and other apps through mobile phones. And that way, it includes languages that are spoken in Canada, New Zealand, and other countries. The issue that I found with this was that it was leaving out South American languages. And then I found the South American Native Language Keyboard, which included languages such as one found in Brazil and the Amazon. And so that's a really good push towards like making technology more inclusive, even um, for places that people may not think, I would say, deserve access to technology simply because they're in the Amazon. I feel like everybody deserves a right to have resources that help them, and so this is a way to do so. And lastly, Modeli, which is one of the projects that helped me understand and start this project, um, that was developed in the University of Oaxaca, is called Modeli because it's a methodology for the design of educational digital objects for indigenous languages. And so it helps it helped children in a small village sort of want to be more intrigued into learning music. And what they found was that children were more intrigued to learn music because they were playing around with technology and this app that showed them like, yes, my language is being represented in technology, and I'm also getting the opportunity to play with technology. But then it also made me wonder, because my family's from Oaxaca and I visited a couple times, Like up until a few years ago, there was barely any cellular service, let alone Wi-Fi. So I was thinking, like, okay, what is the accessibility issues that are arising if we do adopt this piece of technology to teach mistake for others? Like, will people who live in a further place be able to access this because of Wi-Fi issues, or actually access to digital devices, as it can be very expensive? So, when I started to think about this, I put it into pros and cons. So, the issue with our current approach to technology is that it does provide a tool for language and cultural preservation and inclusion and diversity in technology. And this allows for people to be more self reliant, as they can produce knowledge and hold more value of their culture, as we push more into like a world of technology. However, the cons are that some projects that do come into these communities tend to be unsustainable. Like once the project leaders leave, the project finishes and it wraps up. And so, how can we make these projects um, la- longer lasting so that the community members can keep these projects in their community and actually be able to learn from this? So that means like digital literacy, access to the technology, and how to fix these pieces of software and make them stay upgraded. So I also encountered that because there are accessibility issues, we do have to be more mindful of that as we move on with these projects. And so, if we think about the types of projects that we are seeing sometimes, the lack of community collaboration is an issue because you're not allowing the community to determine what they're comfortable with. And we sometimes might be able to push them into places that they're not comfortable with. And so that sort of pushes against what the motive of using technology to solve cultural preservation to help, because you're now pushing people to do something that they wouldn't want to do. So that's something that I've been sort of trying to understand more, how what this collaboration looks like in communities. And my findings and beliefs since I've been here for around 2 months or so has been that the ICT curriculum development occurring in schools is something that brought me here to understand more. Because I know my opportunity to understand technology and computer science allowed me to use my unique way of thinking of the world and bring it to do research in this area. So the more we develop ICT curriculum in schools, we're allowing people to sort of find an interest in it if they want, and then carry out their ways of thinking and bring it to technology to make it more diverse and inclusive. And so I did also find that websites are not used as much as they are in the United States. Yet there's a use of WhatsApp and Facebook as a way to circulate information and help share resources with others. So this is because IP addresses are actually very expensive to acquire, and website maintenance and management is like also hard. Um, but instead, finding alternative ways to share information does show like there are not the same pieces of technology need to be used to solve issues. And so I also saw that the computer centers and public libraries are ways to provide accessibility to computers for anyone who wants them, which is one of the ways that I was able to access technology when I was starting off and when I was younger. My mom would always take me to the public library and let me use a computer. So that's a good step. And then as the development of technological skills increases in Belize, I see that there's a desire to sort of understand more and develop digital literacy. So it's very interesting because I am going to so many countries to understand what the development of ICT curriculum and even technology looks like in these countries. So seeing how the infrastructure does affect what the country can do and where it's at in technology is very interesting. Uh, so yes. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I look forward to talking to anyone.
Thank you very much, Miss Leslie, for exploring the challenges and opportunities surrounding access and use of ICT in Belize, and also for your commitment to expanding and beyond your borders and creating those bridges for areas of collaborations between Indigenous and First People and descendant people across the globe. This is also a reminder for all of our viewers and listeners tuning in that we have a question and answer segment coming up around 10 a.m. or probably a little bit before 10 a.m. So if you have any questions for the presenters, if anything has sort of sparked an era of conversation or discussion, be sure to leave your comments either on Facebook or on YouTube for our question and answer segment that will be coming up very soon. We now move into our last presentation for this segment. Our third presenter for this morning almost needs no introduction. She is Miss Felicita Cocom Cantun, and she's widely known across Belize for her efforts in cultural preservation. As Miss Felicita describes herself, she has never fallen into the habit of thinking of herself as being cultureless. Miss Felicita proudly identifies herself as Maya. She has dedicated more than 40 years of her life in the primary classroom as a teacher and educator. And as Miss Felicita also describes, her life has flourished when she stepped away from the classroom and focused more of her efforts onto cultural preservation. As she describes, one of her most remarkable achievements has been that she has been able to take her teaching out of the classroom and to expand her teaching both nationally and internationally. One of her greatest achievements, in her own words, is opening the doors to reviving the Maya ball game of Pok, of which Belize is a three-time champion. The revival of the ball game was a brainchild of Miss Felicita that started around 2015, and through her efforts and partnerships, she has been able to see the game flourish in Belize and grow. Now there are more male and female team and even kids teams, thanks to her vision of reviving the Maya ball game. With the help of sponsors, she has also succeeded in building one of the first contemporary Maya ball courts in Belize for playing Pok, and she has even worked to host the entire Mundo Maya and the Caribbean for the regional Pok championships. We will now hear of her efforts with Hardina Pachamama through her presentation titled La Milpa.
La Milpa. Well, here, us Mayas, Milpa is something regular. It's a daily living thing. Cultivation of La Milpa dates back as 3,500 years ago or even 4,000 years ago. But some of you might ask, what is La Milpa? Milpa is interplanting of what we need, what we need to sustain ourselves. In our case, us Mayas, corn, or some people will call it maize, beans, squash. We call them the three sisters. We plant the corn, we plant the beans. The vine of the beans will climb up the corn, and we plant the squash so that it helps with the weed not coming out. So more or less, that is La Milpa. However, we, the women, did not only plant these three plants, not just the corn and beans and the squash. We also planted other vegetables that we need to use in our kitchen. Women, as we know, are key agents in achieving environmental and social changes for the development of the family, of the community, and of the nation. We found out that salaries earned are not enough to buy everything necessary to feed the family. For this reason, the women of K.U.L.C.H.A, the women of Guardians of Culture, decided to create La Milpa the way our ancestors did, so that the family can produce and consume fresh and healthy products at low cost for a balanced diet, and thus alleviate their economic situation in a certain way. Next slide. Okay, we planted corn, we planted beans, we planted squash, we planted okras, cilantros, cucumbers, and we thought it was going to be an easy job. It was not the way you think. What you think is not what you live when you are on the spot, on the space. We noticed that we had challenges. One, the drought. We had to be every morning watering our plants because no rain from the heavens. But another challenge was the insects, the worms eating our plants. We found out that we had to do something about this. And since K.U.L.C.H.A ladies wanted an organic milpa, well, some suggested, well, go to the how we call that place that sells things to spray the plants. I can't recall the names. Okay, but then we said, no, that is not what we want. We want organic milpa. So that is what we did. Next slide, please. Most of us, all of us, not most of us, all of us, was our first time experimenting in planting a milpa. Well, we thought, and this is if our ancestors did, we can do it. So, but working on the milpa, we found challenges, and as mentioned, one of them was the insects and the worms eating our plants. So we did not want to go and buy pesticides and insecticides, commercial pesticides and insecticides. So some of the ladies checked with their grandfathers what they used to do, how they used to fix up this problem. And they were told that at that time, a milpa was easy. You just go, you plant, and then you harvest. At that time, there were not so many insects eating the plants. But since that was not our case, well, we had to find something to do. We were lucky that right here in our community, we have the agricultural station where we have agricultural officers, people who can help. Therefore, we contacted them, and then they offered to show us how to make organic insecticides, organic pesticides. What we had to use? We had to use things that we can find in the market. In this picture, we can see the ladies peeling the garlic, cutting onions. In fact, what we use for our organic insecticide was, we used garlic, we used ginger, we used onions, we used mint, we used epazote, we used herbs that have a scent, like the basil, like the epazote, like the mint. We also use habanero peppers, the chili peppers. We also use the the rice. Whenever you pound the rice, there's a little brown skin that comes off. We use that. We use vinegar, and we use alcohol. So all these ingredients we have in our kitchen. Therefore, we just gathered the amount that we needed. We blended everything, and we had our organic insecticide. We were instructed on how to do it, how to use it, and when to use it. Therefore, we gained, because this was a knowledge that we did not know. And after using it, we found out that it works well. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, here we see the habaneros, the aromatic herbs, the onions, the garlic, everything that we use. And the ladies worked as a team. All of us worked as a team. So we did not find it very difficult to produce this insecticide. Next slide. Oh, lo and behold, after so much work under the sun hot, now it's a time to rejoice. Ladies are proudly showing off their products from La Milpa. In this picture, we can see cucumber, we can see beans, we can see cilantro, which we had a lot. Unfortunately, at that time when we harvested our cilantro, it was just selling for $4 a pound. Now, yesterday, it was selling at $50 a pound. So Also, that is a learning for us. We must learn when to plant if you're going to plant lots. If you're going to plant just for your consumption, well, you can plant it anytime. But if you're going to plant lots, you have to find the months when they are scarce, so you get a good price for your vegetables. Next slide. The pumpkin, the squash. Pumpkin belongs to the squash family. This was a gift from Mother Earth. We did not expect to harvest this much. We had pickup loads of the pumpkins. Not easy work. We had to cut up the pumpkins, extract all the pepitos that are inside. We had to wash them, and we have to spread them on the sun to dry. So in this picture, we use zinc sheets to spread all the pepitos, and then it takes like 3 days of very hot sun for it to dry, so we can store it. This, yes, we can store, not like our cilantro. Our cilantro, we cannot store the cilantro and wait until it's $50 a pound to sell it. We have to sell it on the same day you harvest it. However, the pepitos, we had the opportunity to make it dry and then store it, and now we sell whenever it has a high price. Next slide, please. Again, we have excess. Even though the group is 10 members, we had excess. We could not consume all that we harvested. Therefore, we sold our excess. We harvested lots and lots and lots of cucumbers. So we had to sell. Also, this beside the cucumber, we have another type of squash. These are consumed when they are young. When they are ripe also, we can harvest the pepitos just the way you saw the previous one, but it's another type. And the seeds are used differently. The seeds that are used more often are the ones with the that we harvested, that we showed you first. So the ladies, all of us had excess, and either we gave it away to families, friends, or we sold the excess. Next slide. Looking at these pictures, really working in La Milpa was not easy. All of us know that it's not easy to work under the sun hot. However, it really has its advantages. Working in La Milpa helps us to reconnect with nature. The women, they go inside the milpa. La milpa is a place where the women reconnect with nature. La milpa is a place of learning, a place of observation, and of caring. that motivates the women and their families, because the crops planted in the milpa are those related to the needs and the preferences of the family. Most naturally, we have to plant those that grow in the area. At La Milpa, the women of Kananetsil, as a group, participate in different productive activities and ensure food and nutrition for the entire family. We plant and we harvest the food needed by the family. From the milpa, can we change the slide? Next slide. From milpa to tourism. Women saw, because everybody was talking about La Milpa, therefore, people got to know about the women and the Milpa at Pachamama. Therefore, women started to provide tours of La Milpa, of course, with pride, to the tourists who visit the area. The women prepare the food from La Milpa's harvest, making the acronym from La Milpa to the table, making it true. These they serve to the visitors and also engage them in the preparation of the food. Next slide. From La Milpa at Pachamama. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed and learned from
Thank you very much, Miss Felicita, for that wonderful presentation on La Milpa, looking at the connections between people and their land. We will now open the floor to our audience for our live question and answer segment. You still have a couple more seconds to put your comments and questions either on the Facebook or YouTube comment sections for our presenters. We now welcome all of our presenters on stream, and we will begin with our question and answer segment. Hi, Miss Leslie. Hi, Miss Bell. Hi, Mr. Delmer. Thank you again for your presentations and for supporting the K.U.L.C.H.A Symposium. It's lovely to see you all. All right, so we had quite a few questions, primarily on our YouTube. So we'll go ahead and get started with a couple of them. Our first question is from Christine Cray. I believe that might be Dr. Christine Cray. And if not, then there's always the opportunity to become doctor. But this question is for Mr. Delmer Sib. And so it reads, thank you for an interesting presentation, Mr. Sib. You mentioned that school lessons reinforce negative images of the Maya. Can you share one example of that?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the question. Actually, I think historically that comment was more a historic type discussion, but I can provide perhaps two examples. One, generally the education towards a very Western understanding of our realities, and one of the intricacies of that is that it projects that traditional knowledge, and this does not only refer to the Yucatec Maya, but to many other groups. Traditional knowledge is seen as or presented as backward, as a thing of the past, as a thing that you don't really use for modern contexts. However, I think more and more, even when looking at what Ms. Felicita Cantun just presented, you're seeing that there is a lot of knowledge that is very important and valuable for today and our future. in addition to that, I think it is worth noting that historically, the knowledge of our different groups in Belize, traditional groups, have been kept away from the classroom. In fact, up until recently, we have some very recent efforts. We are getting some of the traditional knowledge, language, and so on. For example, the Garifuna Language Commission that is happening. Um, we are getting a lot more traction as it relates to the formal education system. But that's an ongoing movement. But historically, most of these knowledge systems, as it relates to even traditional farming, for example, traditional ways of doing in a systemic manner that would represent my view. Thank you.
I think we lost you just for a bit there at the end, Elmer. Um, but thank you very much for taking
Okay,
on that
can you?
question.
Okay, well, I hope my answer was clear. I don't know if
I think
if
we,
it was heard.
yeah, we lost the last sentence, but that's okay. We actually have a follow-up question for you as well. This one is from Dr. Cynthia Robin, who has done quite a bit of work and is actually up in Northern Belize and is actually presenting this afternoon. Her questions were also sort of related to those colonial legacies. So first of all, she says, thank you for your presentation, and then goes into your mention of the legacy of colonial education policies, and asks if you can share any additional thought on what a decolonized education policy in Belize would look like.
I think that there has to be a paradigm shift for us to talk about decolonization, where we could have, for example, Felicita Cantun, other persons such as Andy Chuk, be recognized also as important knowledge keepers, and not only recognized in the sense of community, but also in the sense of the academic fields of saying these persons hold a particular body of knowledge that is important, and that we should also systemically not only use them to or to an extent go and seek information for us to do research, but give them the respect that they deserve. In that context, I also believe that those knowledge systems need to be integrated within our education system. So when we talk about policies, perhaps we should also be talking about the integration of traditional knowledge, the integration of different languages, and having policies in place that would give them the respect and the space and place that they deserve within the education system. Because to me, when we're talking about these different bodies of knowledge, traditional knowledge systems or indigenous knowledge systems, we are really talking about the core of what it means to be Belize. And part of that is not really included within the system. We need to have more spaces within the system to create more flexible open spaces where these debates, these discussions about how our ancestors used to use these knowledges to solve their problems and how they can be used to solve our current problems uh, are engaged with and also discussed in wider platforms and forums.
Thank you very much for that, Delmer. I know I'm moderating, but I do want to jump in here as well. As sort of when I think of what we can use to build these, or what a decolonized education policy, I think of the wonderful case studies that we have both in Tumulkin and in Gulisi. In Tumulkin especially, we have that really good case study of an example of including sort of indigenous practices, lifestyles, life ways within a formal educational system, and sort of the challenges and opportunities that have arisen in having that be sustained over a long period of time. Especially since I think Tumukin was founded maybe 2000 or prior to 2008 at least. So we have quite a bit of sort of information in terms of what that has looked like and how that can be replicated at a larger scale. But also, if you look at the profile of the students that have gone through Tumulkin, we also look at sort of cross-cultural education and what it has been like for non-Maya persons who have actually studied within these areas. And then, of course, Gulisi looking at it from the primary level, and also looking at language integration and how that has sort of worked and been shaped. So wonderful question, Dr. Robin, and thank you for taking that on, Delmer. I have a question, another question again for Delmer. There are questions for everybody on here. But this one I would pose to you first, Delmer, and then maybe to Miss Leslie, if she can take that on, maybe from her perspective as well, or sort of your background and knowledge and experience. And then Miss Fell, if you can comment as well, maybe from your work with youth. But the question is from Dr. Alicia McGill-Ebbett. Hello, and thank you very much for joining our stream, and congratulations on the wonderful work that you do within Creole communities in Belize. Dr. McGill-Ebbett asks, or says, thanks, Mr. Sim, and asks, what have you found excites Yucatec Maya youth about heritage? Also, do you see possibilities and efforts going on with heritage education or organizing across different Maya groups in Belize?
I think that first, good morning and thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm sorry for jumping in because I got excited with the question itself. I think that we are learning as we go along, and one of the propositions that I made in the presentation was that we also have to sort of engage globalization and adapt to certain practices. So certainly technology excites a lot of people, but the approach that we've been using in San Antonio is actually the approach of having a fair. It's not necessarily a cultural fair, it's more a heritage celebration fair that engages a series of activities centered on community identity building. So it's centered on the community of San Antonio, and that's just a case study. But the idea of connecting people to their heritage, to who they are, to their community, and putting it in an exciting way really attracts a lot of youths. And although we have to strike a middle ground as it relates to the aim of the activity that we're hoping to have or we're hosting, we do have to engage with aspects such as mixing music with events that relate to language, music, dances, cultural expressions, with games. For example, traditional games are a big hit in many of the cultural activities. Children in particular get so engaged and get so involved in these traditional games. And at the same time, for example, in the Another Beautiful Day in San Antonio activity, we would have a traditional game being played, and at the same time providing context to the cultural significance to it. So we are sort of creating an opportunity of engagement and at the same time reinforcing it with the cultural significance aspect of it. In a similar manner, having a fair or a festivity, in this case a festival if you want to call it that way, allows for several expressions to happen. People come in to connect to food, come in to connect to archaeological exhibits, to art, to community issues that they're facing. And to an extent, that, in my view, has been very successful in getting more people engaged to a larger extent than what they were before. But obviously, second to that, I would say that the digital age, the media, all of that is gaining ground. And I personally feel very proud when I see young people engaged in creating videos about their heritage, documenting parts of food or cultural living and so on. So to me, those are two of the major areas where I see that we're trying, and I also see opportunities for the future to develop a level of sustainability and also to develop, then, for the lack of a better word, an archive of our practices, an archive driven in the community that enable not only a connection to past heritage, but heritage that also exists contemporary, tangible and intangible ones.
Thank you for that, Delmer. Since you mentioned the games, your games and activities, and how that has sort of captivated young audiences, I will also say a shout out to the Minds game. sort of like the Belizean chalupa. I use it. I love the game. I love chalupa as well. But also looking at the different sort of what was added to the game to make it Belizean, which to me is sort of a good delve into how we sort of identify either with food or popular culture or different characters and different nuances within our culture. So shout out to them and really, really good job on that. And if you haven't purchased your game, please go ahead and do so. So another plug for supporting micro enterprises up well in Northern Belize, but also in Belize in general. Miss Fell, I would also like to pose this question to you. In your experiences working with youth, what has been sort of the area that excites them the most about their heritage? Your Miss Fell, you're muted. I would have to ask you to unmute yourself. Thank you.
I am unmuted now.
Yes.
Malokin, buenos días. What excites the youths? Everything that has to do with their heritage. At present, we are working with the youths on the language. We have a group that I think it's the only one in Belize where we sing. We use music and singing to help the children learn the language. And what has them excited? Oh, at present, the ages of the children are from 10 to 12. And what has them excited right now is that they're going to participate in an international indigenous music or singing competition. So for some of these children, it would be the first time that they would be going out of Belize to take part in a competition. And so that makes them excited. That's with our language. And in playing with the pok. Right now, at the ending of November, under 17 youths are traveling to El Salvador, where they're going to have a competition with 7 countries. And it's really exciting because we have the female also. At the beginning, they thought that Pok was only for the male, but now even the females are involved. And I can say that after the event of last year, where Belize hosted the international event, K.U.L.C.H.A has grown tremendously. K.U.L.C.H.A has like over 40 players in the group. So that shows that they are excited. They want to practice every day, even though they are students. And their assignment in school doesn't stop them. So they will hurry, do their assignments and then get ready to go practice. And I'm saying, why practice so late? They say, the práctica está caliente, they say. So they want to keep practicing. So this is just something about knowing that they are Mayas and they are preserving their culture through this game that has them excited, plus the traveling also. And in November they travel. December they have another international in competition in Mexico. So these things get them excited. Working with my youths, you see my beautifully embroidered dress. I embroider it and I teach the children to do it, and they can do it. They embroider their own wipil, even the boys. So these things get them excited. It's doing the things that they like. And I think the way how a person sells what he or she does, gets the children, the youths excited. I call them children, even though they are taller than I am, but I call them children. It gets them excited.
Thanks, Miss Phil. That's okay. You can even call us babies. I'll be your babies.
I know, I
Um,
love you so much.
we love you too, Miss Phil. But yes, uh, to recap, sort of those opportunities for self-expression, those opportunities to sort of harness and express your culture. I think tactile opportunities I have found also sports is not only a great way of expression, but a unifier. So sports goes across different cultures and different communities. And yes, that opportunity to travel internationally, to one, express your culture, but two, to experience and to look at the commonalities that probably indigenous persons across the globe share. So thank you for that, Miss Bell. And lastly, I'll pose the same question to you, Leslie, and perhaps as a youth yourself, you can share your perspective.
So I think what the youth really enjoys is learning more about their past. It wasn't until I got to Belize that I learned that if you don't know your past generations, you don't really know who you are. And well, that was the first time I heard that phrase. And it really did make me think like it wasn't until I started hearing stories about my family and like my grandparents and so that I started realizing what that meant for identity and like myself. And so when you, I think when you become included in different activities, like with friends, as Miss Felicita was saying, like I was with her for a month, seeing like what these activities look like, and all of the children that are in the singing groups or in the poke poke team, like they become friends and they encourage one another to continue learning more about heritage. And so it's also this thing where you build community with those who are also doing similar activities, and I feel like that pushes the youth to be more included when they see that others as themselves are also participating in these cultural activities. So that's really like nice to see because I came from a place where like these cultural events weren't really held. Um, and so now coming to Belize and I get to see like the House of Culture and Miss Felicita like doing these types of events that encourage the youth to actually learn about themselves and participate in areas that they're interested in, because if you force a child to like go into, let's say, playing sports when they don't want to play sports, they do push away from that. But if you get them into something that they really like art and demonstrating through artwork, culture, like that's something that pushes them to want to learn more because it's part of their passion as well.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Leslie, and for the work that you have been doing. And also, I think for sort of being at the forefront in your own personal sort of growth and exploration through your support of our communities here in Belize. We have a couple comments from our audience as well. So we have Mahoch Mak and the Chuk saying, great presentation, Mr. Sib. And we have Novello also saying to the presenters in general that it's been inspirational presentations and saying a thank you. Um, and then, Miss Leslie, we have a question for you. So this is from Miss Ella Bekeshi, one of our co-directors here at HENB. She may be asking that on behalf of somebody, but the question reads, it is often complicated to use indigenous languages in ICT or have direct translations as they actually have a more nuanced grammar or some terms don't exist. Do you find this to be a challenge?
I would say it definitely is a challenge. Mostly, I didn't take any linguistic courses, so I'll be interning with a linguistic um, like specialist moving forward because I am trying to see like, for example, in Mishtek there is no dictionary, and that's because there's so many variants of the language, and nobody can actually agree on how it should be written. And then that translates into that we can't put Mishtek into ICT, for example, if we don't have orthography. And so it does become like really challenging because then communities that speak different variants have to come together and talk about how they would want to unify this language that has been spoken in different ways and that um, isn't really the same, if you would say. They are part of the same group of family, like language family, but not the same variant. And so it is complicated, and mostly I would say my approach to this has been like actually bringing in people that speak the language that can explain it to the developers. Because if you're just looking at it from a computer science perspective and you don't really think about the grammar and these nuances that exist within the language and you're just translating it directly, then you do make the error of mistranslating a language. And so, sort of, and you're paying disrespect to it by doing this because you can easily just ask someone of the community. So, as we bring in more people who are from different backgrounds and are interested in developing inclusive technology like this, they can also help address these issues that others who are just developing it for their job might not see.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And very important point on not only, well, the need for sort of competences from different fields or different areas of study, which I think sort of centers collaboration, but also synergies. Also sort of looking at the world of opportunities that exists when that level of networking and cooperation does occur. And like you said, you are able to create a product that sort of does justice not only to sort of the aspect of preservation or access, but to ensure that it is something that's culturally relevant that is being produced. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a last question for Mr. Delmer. This is from Mr. Dylan Vernon. Thank you very much for joining us. And this question reads is that it's a very informative presentation. And Mr. Vernon asks, do you think that the state has a direct role to play in preserving the Yucatec Maya language? For example, giving students in schools in selected communities the option to learn the language. This, of course, is a question that can extend to other indigenous languages.
I think, well, thank you for the question. And I believe that it comes as a sort of shared responsibility. The community also has a role to play in promoting and advocating for the language and perhaps even going as far as creating curriculum and so forth. I do believe that the state has a big role to play, especially since they manage the education system, which is the formal education system. And personally, I was very pleased to know that, for example, the Garifuna Language Commission uh, was able to allow or advocate for and was eventually granted permission to share their language in selected schools across the southern parts of Belize. That's a very positive development in my view. And in my view, it's also a blueprint that other cultural activists and organizations should be looking at and following. It's an example to obviously look at. But part of it is that the state had to give the authorization for that to happen. So the state does play a big role in providing access to the formal education system, but also in empowering our communities, in letting, for example, people like Miss Felicita Cantun know that they have a support system and that the cultural issues that they're advocating to address are supported in some way. So perhaps some technical support, perhaps some other levels of support that institutions such as NICH can provide. But policy-wise, there also, I think, needs to be a discussion on a comprehensive language policy. I think that for some time now we've been talking about that idea that although Belize's education system has a policy as it relates to teaching languages, it needs to be a policy that reinforces the indigenous languages and other languages other than English. Although we also have a culture policy that speaks to language, we need something that is broader to address the existence and negotiation and treatment of languages on a broader um, forum as it relates to Belize. So yeah, the state has a big role in my view.
Thank you, Delmer, for delving into that and for pulling on both your expertise as at the high school level and at the junior college level, and also as from your aspect of community work. We have a couple questions for Miss Felicita. Miss Fel, if you're still on the call. Hi. So first, Miss Ella asks, how do you use the natural pesticides? And then we have Christine Cray saying that you have beautiful produce, which I second. So congratulations to the Milperas. And the follow-up question being, do you spray your organic pesticides on the leaves or around the periphery of the field?
Okay, how do we use it? First, we have to prepare it with the correct mixture. And then we just spray it directly on the plants. And not only on the plants that are affected, because inside the milpa, let's say we have 100 stalks of corn, but you walking inside, you can see, okay, this one has been eaten, this one. So we do not spray only that one. We spray the whole area. And we after the preparation, I think I spoke on all the ingredients that we use, but I missed the water. We have to use water. So we mix everything with the water. We put them inside the spray, the sprayer with pumps, and then we spray the whole area. That is how we use it.
Thank you, Miss Vel. Very, again, important discussion. What I found to be sort of different or significant on my end would be the aspect that the pests weren't an issue when you were speaking to sort of other elders or persons that some of these are maybe new challenges that we are facing. I've also personally found that there are some plants that are a lot more susceptible to those pests, especially the pumpkins, the sweet pepper, and the tomatoes, which would be native plant species to our region. But entire produce, the young flowers and the leaves sort of being really, really, really attacked by bugs, which also, I guess, looks at how we change our approaches to the milpas, to our indigenous and traditional knowledge systems, to our planting and to our harvesting. But you know, also if you're keeping true to using organic pesticides and growing organic fruits, that might look a little bit different now and might have some challenges. Miss Fel, could you also talk to us maybe, I'm posing my own question about your calabash trees, and those gourds, and also, that aspect of the plants that you include in your milpa?
Okay. This year we did not plant the gourds, the calabash. Why? Okay, we planted okay, we don't call them the gourds. We call them the Maya Yeti. Is that the name of the expensive cups that you buy in Yeti? Something like that. So we call them our Maya Yeti. The thing is that at our first intent, when we harvested the calabash before they were ripe enough, we did not know how to judge okay, is it okay for, even though you see them beautifully on the ground, but I think we had to we should have documented everything when we planted it and when we harvested, because when we harvested them, most of them were not that ripe, so we could not collect the seeds. So that is another important thing, the seed, the collection of seeds. And these seeds, we cannot go to the agro shop and buy them because they don't sell them. These are local seeds that we have to get from the local farmers. So at present, we do not have those. I will still try to get the seeds, but then what you saw on the video were the pepitos, the popular pepitos. Well, again, also from what we harvested, we collected the seeds that we are going to use to plant again. So this was a very good harvest, and it was harvested at the correct time. So we have enough seeds to replant again. The gourds, well, I don't know, but we have to get seeds. I don't know from where, but I will find them, and then we're going to replant them and harvest them at the correct time.
Thank you, Miss Vel, for sharing that and for your work in your milpa, because I think this also is an aspect of sort of preserving heirloom seeds, and also acknowledging that our climate is a little bit different now. So we have rain, quotes unquote, out of season. We have extended dry periods. We have the threats of drought and threats of fire. So also that documenting of how our seasons have changed, and sort of that really aspect that our culture and our traditions are tied to, whether it is tied to climatic patterns, and that is changing, and so culture changes along with it. So thank you very much for sharing that, Miss Phil, and for your work in preserving a different aspect of your culture through your milpa. All right. So that, I think, wraps up the questions that we have in our stream. We have a couple sort of thank yous or general commentary. So we have Dave here saying one of the ideas to preserve native or cultural heritage would be to have a cultural theme park dedicated to the Mayas in Belize. So perhaps looking at different avenues that would generate that interest outside of certain cultural groups. We have general thank yous in here. We have love this, so some aspect of the presentation landed well. And we have Mr. Zane saying he has friends in this stream and saying great job to us all. So thank you very much to everybody who has joined into our segments. Thank you to Ms. Leslie, to Mr. Delmer, and to Ms. Felicita Cantun for your participation in the Culture Symposium and for joining us in the question and answer segment. And of course, to our viewers, thank you very much for joining in live, for asking your questions, and for keeping up with language, culture, heritage, and arts, for keeping up with culture. We now move into a very quick coffee break. So coffee break, get your own coffee. So we'll move into about a short 10-minute break and start up our next segment of our presentations in the next 10 minutes. So stick around, take the break that you need, and we will see you right here on this same stream within the next 10 minutes for our next segment of our morning set of papers for the Culture Symposium. Thank you very much, and we will see you very, very soon.
Heritage Education Network Belize Culture Symposium, Community Issues and Innovative Practices. Make sure you join with our Facebook and YouTube. I want to there, you better there.
All we know that you are there.
Hello and welcome back from the coffee break. We hope that you all were able to refresh yourselves, get something to drink, have a little break, and we hope that you are now ready for some more exciting presentations. This is a reminder to our audience that we have live question and answer segments with the presenters at the end of the sessions. So if you're just joining in, don't forget to ask your questions in the comment sections, either on Facebook or on YouTube. Also, as Dr. Villarreal beautifully worded yesterday, our Culture Symposium is a volunteer event. So this symposium is not made possible, by monies or grants, but through our volunteers' passion and love for Belize and love for are expressions of culture. So we would like to take this moment again to thank our special guest moderator yesterday, Dr. Ali Villarreal, our IT support, Mr. Marco Vasquez, Ms. Nadime, for some of her back-end work and support. But also we would like to thank our community of supporters who have made this symposium possible. If anyone on the stream who appreciates the work that it takes to put together this symposium would like to consider donating to our cause so that we can make more events like this possible, you can find our donation links at our website at heritagebelize.org. We now continue with presentations on modern Belizean identities, and we move into our first presentation by Deetra Gillett and Mr. Joshua Sambola. So Deetra is a researcher and Belizean cultural advocate who has invested over 19 years in researching and promoting primary sources at various archives around the world, in vital statistics, at court records, with the purpose of identifying and bringing to light some of the founding families of modern day Belize, with a focus on Belizean Creole culture. Deetra is a founder of United Belize Grassroots Association, which is an NGO. Her co-author is Mr. Joshua Sambola, who is a Musketean historian and community activist who similarly works to create visibility for the Musketean people and their deep historical connections to Belize and to Creole populations in Belize. We now move into their presentation. We appear to have some difficulties loading that presentation. While we work on the back end to sort that out, we will move into what should have been our second presentation for this morning. That presentation is titled Visualizing Maya Youth Perceptions of Wellness. The presentation is put together by Mr. Lee McLaughlin. I'm sorry, Lee, for butchering your name. I do apologize. It has always been a challenge. Mr. Lee is a PhD geography candidate with the Global Social Cultural Studies Department at Florida International University. His academic background is in conservation management, followed by 14 years working experience in Australia and Central America, particularly in Belize. He has now returned to academia to investigate the specific conditions that support or impede indigenous-led approaches to biodiversity conservation. This paper is presented by Mr. Lee, Dr. James Stinton from York University, and Elodio Rash from Julian Cho Society. We move into visualizing Maya youth perceptions of well-being.
Hi everyone, we're grateful for the opportunity to present Visualizing Maya Youth Perceptions of Wellbeing. This is a quick overview of our presentation before Elodio discusses the background.
Well, the Future We Dream document is being created by engaging youths, elders, traditional leaders, and women through a working session. It is a space where we connected through a process that allows us as the Maya people to reroot ourselves in our land, in our language, and ancestral memories and wisdom. So out of this, the collective vision has been emerged, which we call now a future we dream. Well, our young people are the strengths and the future of our communities. or 50% of the 41 Maya villages that we work with, its population is young and is growing, and they do also have a level of formal education.
The partnership between the K.U.L.C.H.A Society and the Young Lives Research Lab has been more than 5 years in the making, commencing with the sounding of the conch shell, which created a space for youth voices to discuss issues that they felt important, was followed by an Ab Inc., which brought together those youth with elders and academics, particularly around the impact of social media. In 2022, the Partnership for Youth and Planetary Wellbeing was created, guided by decolonial values and centering the voices of ecologically vulnerable Indigenous youth. The action plan co-created by this partnership was led by 3 questions. What does it mean to live well as a Maya youth in this age of climate crisis? How are Maya youth responding and taking action for planetary health? How can we support and work with Maya youth to platform and amplify youth-led efforts? To achieve this, we adapted an emerging innovative visual method called video voice, which is ideally suited to projects that centre research subjects' knowledge and self-determined issues of concern. A critically important aspect of this method is its foundation on building partnerships.
The Maya people's knowledge, it is not a static, it continues to change and it continues to grow. The Maya people are open to new technologies and to new ideas. Therefore, JCS, through one of its program areas, the sustaining and revitalization of Maya culture in 41 Maya communities, created a program that aims to create a space to amplify young people's, young women and men's voice through a meaningful participation that will usher the Maya future. The 6 indigenous youths were trained in theoretical and practical aspects of the digital media content and the film production. These youths were trained in interview techniques, the storytelling, and video editing. So each youth had the opportunity to develop and produce their own of 1 5-minute video, digital films that focused on environmental, climate change, or any related topic to amplify their voices as a young people that is engaging in envisioning and creating a healthy Maya future. So young people's participation or involvement in digital media content has been useful to the development and the promotion or the advocacy of the Maya land rights of the Maya people.
Over a series of workshops from 2023 into 2024, the youth participants were introduced to and practiced interviewing methodologies, set up and use of technical recording equipment, filming A-roll and B-roll, understanding the importance of angles, movement, light and audio. With these skills, they are able to commence interviewing each other Maya youth and elders in their communities. This was followed by a workshop that focused on the development of a series of short 3 to 5 minute films on issues around health, well-being and culture in their communities. It involved training on finding your idea, storytelling, story structure, use of humour, use of drama. Following the workshop with their film screenplays in hand, the youth participants went out to shoot their A-roll and B-roll before returning for some follow-up sessions on video editing. It was the latter sessions on video editing that took the bulk of time. The participants produced a total of 7 films. Their film topics are listed here, and following is a brief selection of short excerpts of their work.
Maya communities, through their rich tapestry of autonomy and well-being, weave together to form the essence of a thriving culture. Autonomy in this context refers to the ability of the Maya people to govern themselves, preserve their traditions, and chart their course in the modern world. Well-being is the flourishing result, encompassing physical, cultural, and emotional dimensions.
I get to know what is well-being is being happy in your community, living in a peaceful land, owning everything you have.
Autonomy means that you have the right to speak for yourself and that you have the power to fight for what belongs to you and for your rights.
As a community, we have the say, the power, and the control.
Autonomy means is to have right to control over something that belongs to you.
Traditional Maya dishes, organic and delicious, play an important part in the well-being of the Maya community. Instead of relying on stores, processed, and canned goods, the Maya people cultivate their own crops using fresh and naturally grown foods, gaining nourishment that's both delicious and good for the body.
Haawi makanakawi malao. Haan na mas travel joke.
Di kuahan mas tento perkuhanan makawiman hanan makakosh saka kunit herero tsin piyak or that is very important to recall kuhan ay hanan ko kosh.
Mayas would grow their crops on farms, but some would garden and cultivate basic crops like pepper, oregano, halalu, tomatoes, and more behind their homes.
Para koshik yanaka choke kaya chirish laka kochoch laka tawri kaya laka kirasi kaya.
Eating foods from the earth is like getting a direct gift from nature, filled with all the goodness and healthiness that a body truly needs.
In the Maya village of Nalumka, that is found in the Jewel of Belize, where the biodiversity flourishes. Farming isn't just a way of life, it is the lifeblood of the community, connecting our traditions with the land we hold sacred.
Farming is so important. The Maya people depends on the farm, depends on farming, and that is the way our life is, and that is the way how we live.
Most of the Maya people are farmers, even though some of them are teacher, policemen, soldier, but they still do farming. You need to plant your own food that you eat because food at the market right now are very expensive. And canned goods are not healthy, so we need to eat fresh fruits or vegetables that come from our farm.
From the dawn of time, the Maya people have shared a unique relationship with the land. They take care of it, and in turn, the land takes care of them. Through their culturally chemical-free sustainable practices, farming nurtures the land, promoting biodiversity and long-term health of their flora and fauna.
Na katyaw jak unshida mukuni ke usaring ta chakiban cha eru khana ki kwanko cha unshid like tahbi sakal ke eru a inkir sa shikala o ke ma a chak pa ya sa tempa an awon ya tin ke eru sari chak muko ha ta ha ban awon kwang chikana kon
K.U.L.C.H.A kwang ken akhikus nauk ang halak chikaw ma ka benen khachema ka ya naqaq diqal kwang stush bitche bas ka kan qisis sistem tatkal para chabilik al nael porque maga tichen ka awonak aham na tukin ste balaan she kamsa roq she tiarna akchisharu shat op alenki shat toqchi ben haange chilo miso kwa kli chakre ichma kache mokota usar che benen sa mas chabil chokre.
Thatch houses serve as an indispensable cornerstone within the Maya community, fulfilling practical, social, and cultural needs. These traditional structures not only provide essential shelters but also weave together the threads of communal unity and cultural heritage among the Maya people's well-being. The forest acts as a natural hardware store, enabling the Maya community to get all the resources they need to construct these buildings.
Pap Ich, Subul, Yaah, Cortes, le cabea yan chilticali non San Jose. E pacha bebe, tena kahok eso bishu pachil, lo lekebal, cabea humant que bea, kaman menahabe, meyahabe. Katun kakecha hok so yahmin cheil bisha sikche, shol, tihera, porque tihera na halak timetik no San Jose. Akayanton waye no na olak tu sartik San Jose, chen hadi paili kayanton waye, sik ak etela. بس يانا ولاك بيمينت اك هدابي ولا كتو سارتي تو شانيلي بشاتيو اكتشي ما تفهم إرادة كشتبولا تشي فكمان تبقى كشو أتشي تيينا بقى كشو.
Working together to build touch houses holds great importance for the Maya people. When they join forces, they strengthen their community's unity and shared goals. This teamwork goes beyond just making homes. It also keeps their traditions alive and helps them learning important skills together. By building houses as a group, they share knowledge between generations and become more resilient as a community. This way, they can finish building houses faster and have more time for farming.
The project outcomes can be considered at 3 levels. At the global and policy level, the films were featured in the UNFCCC Youth Climate Report and screened multiple times at the Climate COP28 in Dubai. This was a session facilitated by the K.U.L.C.H.A Society and the Youth Climate Report. They were also selected to screen at several film festivals, including the Imagine Native Festival in Toronto and the Prague International Film Festival. At the community level, one of the principal outcomes was the retention of indigenous data sovereignty, with all data produced being stored in a youth archive to serve as a community resource. A major output was the elevation of youth voices, perspectives and issues in the communities, and particularly amongst leadership. These youth voices also rippled outwards nationally, with social media posts reaching tens of thousands in Belize alone. Locally, a film screening in Punta Gorda showcased the films to community leaders of 41 villages in Toledo. Finally, the impact at the individual levels best captured in the quotes of the youth participants. For example, during an evaluation session, one suggested that in the questions we asked about well-being, we learned a lot from the elders about Maya culture and what it means to be Maya. Doing the interviews will let you learn more about your culture. Another reflected on the whole process, saying, we're no longer shy, you become more talkative, and you get that braveness to talk to other people in the community. With these new skills, some of the youth participants have gone on to make a series of social media reels, essentially short clips of the interviews with youth and elders on issues the youth felt were important. These reels will be released on social media later this year. Here's an example of one.
The access to London, it is important because it is our tradition. We are used to do farming, so accessibility to land is very important to us.
Direct connection with land to be well. If there is no land, then for us as Maya, it's hard, and then I believe there will be no food. So we depend on the land a lot, not only food but also for our building houses.
Coming together and joining our words and our thoughts is also a challenge. So therefore, providing a space such as digital platform for young people to amplify their voices, it will enhance the health and the sustainable and the self-determined.
To be Maya and to be well. Thank you for a really important presentation highlighting indigenous-led approaches to bioconservation or biodiversity conservation, but also the connection that people have with their land and the different forms that that expression can take on, and the outcomes that that creates with that exposure both at local, at regional, and at international levels. And these important youth-led initiatives that center the voices of Indigenous persons and the youth. I think this is also an important aspect for us to also reflect on our own connection to the land that we live on, and our own approaches to sustainability, to biodiversity conservation, and to the ways in which we interact with the land for which we're settlers on. We apologize for the technical difficulties earlier, so we've had to switch the order of our presentations. And now we move back to our presentation with Ms. Deetra Gillett and Mr. Joshua Sambola to introduce again. Ms. Deetra is a researcher and Belizean cultural advocate who has invested over 19 years in researching through different archival and written records the histories of the founding families of modern-day Belize with a focus on Belizean culture. Ms. Deetra is the founder of United Belize Grassroots Association. And her co-author, Mr. Joshua Sambola, is a Mosquita historian and a community activist who works to create visibility for Mosquitan people and their deep historical connections to Belize. We now move into their presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Humphreys, a member of the Kadinago and Creole people of Mosquitia and a history enthusiast. I'm joined by the Belizean historian Deetra Gillett to slightly scratch the surface with this presentation about the formation of the Creole people and identity in Mosquitia and Belize. So the Creole people emerged in mainland Mosquitia before the end of the 17th century when, in 1636, 200 Africans, mainly Angolans, being carried in a Portuguese slave ship by Dutch captains, were left at Cabo Gracias a Dios after around 300 of them were sold at Providence Island, which is also part of Mosquitia. Back then, it was an English colony. Thereafter, most of these Angolan Africans gradually intermarried with some of the native Miskito people, thus created a new people who were then called Zambos by the Spanish and later also by the English. But beside the creation of a new people, these Africans also brought with them new and stronger ideas of governance, politics, and even warfare, which helped in the forging of what the historian Carl often describes as a syncretic polity that blended Amerindian and African leadership traditions with symbolic conventions of majestic power, that is, the Mosquitian kingdom. Such was the case that 7 out of 9 Mosquito kings were of mixed blood, some to a higher degree than others. This is not to say that there existed no discord whatsoever between the original Mosquito people and their descendants, the Zambos, but they also embraced their differences while considering themselves to be a single nation. In 1739, for example, representatives from both Mosquito groups signed a treaty as the Mosquito Nation, both Sambos and Indians, and another in 1780 as the two tribes of Mosquito Indians. Another important point to mention is the input of the white element in the creation of these new people. One of the early and significant waves of the white element came as an official policy of the British Crown in 1743 when the King Most Excellent Majesty in Council approved the recruitment of shoremen to settle the island of Roatan, which back then was a British colony also, or a crown colony, or was in the making to become a crown colony. And British and foreign Protestants were encouraged by the offer of land grants to, quote, contract marriages with Indians, mulattoes, or Negro women, end quote. The result of this can still to this day be found on the Bay Islands, right? Now, when the term Creole was first used in Mosquito is not certain, but Charles Napier Bell, who was born in Scotland in 1835 and grew up in Mosquito until the age of 22, when his family left in 1857, told us in his book that, quote, the colored people call themselves Creoles, end quote, and after describing their habits, gave us this interesting passage. But we had all shades of color besides the Negroes, brown mulattoes, coffee and milk colored quadroons, and a few nearly as white as myself. Generations of ship captains had come and gone, leaving families at all the Creole settlements. Each captain, as he succeeded the last, added some more white blood, till the result in my day was that at Bluefields, Pearl Key Lagoon, Boca del Toro, Kern Island, St. Andrew, and Old Providence, which are the other principal settlements of the Creoles, there were some families nearly white, with coffee and milk mothers, brown grandmothers, and black great grandmothers. One family I knew had all these alive, end quote. But Musketia, though their original birthplace of the Creole people, at least our Creole people, because we know the term Creole is very broad, it applies to many different Creole groups around the world. But at least in our case, though they originated in Musketia, Musketia was not to be the only homeland of the Creole people. And in the year 1787, after the signing of the Convention of London of 14 July 1786 between England and Spain, with the British agreeing to evacuate the country of the mosquitoes, or mosquito, many Creoles, or colored people in general, were taken to what was to become their new home, which is Belize, or back then, the Bay of Honduras. And now, Deetra will help us to understand what became of these people after the evacuation or even during the evacuation. Thank you.
Heritage Network, thank you so much for the honor of allowing myself and Joshua to present in this year's symposium. This year we're covering Owning Our Culture, Belizean Creole Culture, Bay of Honduras and Musketia. Before I begin, I want to send a special thank you to the archives in Kew, Jamaica, Seville, Merida, and Costa Rica. A special thank you to our local archives department in Belize, specifically Miss Maria Pulce, in addition to Dr. Melissa Johnson, who's probably one of the most qualified people to discuss Belizean Creole culture on the academic level, as she lives it daily and is married into one of our River Valley families. Dr. Johnson is also the author of Becoming Creole. Now let me give you a little bit of background about myself. For the last 20 years, I've divulged into the archives and vital records, collecting data on our past. I was also grateful to come from a family of historians, one being my great-grandaunt, who ensured I knew who and where I came from while fostering pride of heritage. Shame within many of our cultures has caused many to forget and deny their heritage. Growing up in a Belizean Creole household, it was no secret who we were. The secret remained with the world, who tried to figure out who we were and place us into a restricted category. For many, sharing and knowing our various backgrounds was taboo. Thus why many chose not to discuss who they were publicly or to an audience who seemed not to comprehend the depth and complexities of our heritage. Now, picking up from where Joshua left off, between March and July of 1787, some 2,207 individuals were evacuated from the Mosquito Shore, also known as Musketia, due to the signed July 14th, 1786 Convention of London Treaty. Most of these evacuees shared indigenous Sambu Mosquito ancestry. As Joshua pointed out, this Afro-Indigenous intermarriage was the beginning of Creole culture in the region of the Bay of Honduras and Musketia. Now, those who evacuated in 1787 were not new to Belize. In fact, Belize, then known as the Bay of Honduras, was considered an extension of Musketia. In 1508, Spanish explorers Vicente Yanez Pinzon and Juan Diaz de Solis noted Mosquito in the area of modern-day Belize near the K.U.L.C.H.A Mountains. In 1634, an established plantation was run by the former governor of Somers Island, Philip Bell, who noted at Placentia Point there were some 600 Puritans, 200 Indians, and 100 slaves. This information is archived with the Winthrop Society, which referenced the area as the Coxcomb Coast Settlement. And those who arrived via the Seaflower ship, the sister ship of the Mayflower, were a part of a negotiated settlement between the Mosquito, the second Earl of Warwick, and the governor, Philip Bell, intended to model the Puritan colony of Massachusetts in a warmer climate. Despite its Puritan agenda, Providence Island and Placentia Point were also trade points for buccaneers who formed an alliance of trade with the Mosquito. Some of the surnames associated with these Caribbean Puritan colonies were Barlett or Barnett, Bowen, Burnell or Burrell, Cable or Cadle, Clark, Dixon, Fairweather, Garnett, Goff, Glover, Jones, Lawson, Lockwood, Lamb, Pratt, Smith, Sumner, Wade, Walker, Wilkinson, and Williams. Many of the 1787 evacuees were described as musty, indicating familiar ties to the area long enough to have shared a Zambu indigenous great-grandparent or going back 4 generations. Families such as the Flowers of the Flowers Bank 14, the Crawfords, and the Whites were not new to Belize in 1787. These families were first in the Bay of Honduras, otherwise known as Belize. However, due to constant threat of Spanish invasion and the Spaniards destroying their established works, many sought the stability and safety amongst the Mosquito. In the early morning of September 15, 1779, St. George's Key, also known as Cayo Cocina back then, was raided by the Captaincy General of Guatemala using Commander Joseph Posada of Bacalar. Captured inhabitants were taken to Bacalar, then Merida, before being transported to prison in Havana, Cuba. 5 men who were able to escape the attack swiftly headed to the Mosquito shore to give their account. Upon hearing what happened to the Baymen, the Mosquito wrote, "We should very effectively revenge ourselves and liberate those our friends we might find alive." General Captain Dalrymple, with 150 Mosquito, proceeded to sail into the Yucatan to locate the imprisoned Baymen. Captain Luttrell reported some 350 Mosquito immediately went into crafts to take the register ships. When the Baymen prisoners were released from Cuba in 1782, many chose to remain within the safety of the Mosquito shore. So who were the Creoles of Belize? Prior to emancipation, the word colored was used to label the people. Some of these colored individuals were sons of the Baymen. However, many of the mothers were Afro-Indigenous women. White Baymen accounted for less than 10% of the population per the 1790 census, and many of them were merchants at sea for the majority of the year. With a population of almost 80% enslaved, most of the slave owners in the Belize settlement were prior enslaved themselves and people of color. The enslaved population didn't just harvest the jungles and forest, they protected the settlement. Many fled into neighboring areas such as the Petén and Yucatan, so much so that the governor of Guatemala complained that Negroes were intermarrying with the native women. By way of Jamaica and Barbados, Africans were relocated to Belize. These men and women created the unique culture within Belize known today as Belizean Creole culture. When their drums were taken away, they found creative ways to create music within labor camps, using utensils such as the grater, spoon, fork, buckets, barrels, donkey jawbone, and later bringing in portable instruments like the mouth organ. This genre of music became known as bruckdown. Although the enslaved were given canned, corned, and salted food rations, many chose to hunt, using organic tools such as the Pocono boy stick for spear fishing and to hunt game meats such as sea turtles and river turtles, gibnut, guana, deer, peccary, and crana. With a combination of African and indigenous knowledge, Our Creole elders knew how to cure venomous bites, something the mosquito were also known for, in addition to bush medicines. Historical Creole areas within Belize, each with something very unique to offer, are Placencia, Monkey River, the Belize River Valley, Ibu Town, Freetown Saboon, and Gales Point. Belizean Creoles who have DNA tested will see that their scientific regions show both Belize and Musketia, many sharing between 10 to 70% indigenous ancestry. Regions of Africa, depending on how long a person can trace their lineage to the area of Belize, reflects Western and Central African countries such as Benin, Mali, Nigeria or Ibu, and Ghana. So to sum it up, Belizean Creole culture, our language, music, and unique foods was created right within Belize from the amalgamation of cultures. As the Garifuna evolved in St. Vincent, so the Belizean Creoles evolved within Belize. For many of us, we have long known who we are and from whom we have come from.
Hello and good morning. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation on the Creole culture in Belize, and also again centering the Mesquite history and heritage into that conversation. We have an ongoing joke at Henby about the dancing and the movement that occurs within our symposium with all the background music. And so we love to hear that music and that aspect of Creole culture from Mr. Brad Patico. So thank you very much, Ms. Deetra. Thank you very much, Mr. Joshua, for that presentation and for bringing Creole culture into our culture symposium conversation. That wraps up the morning segment of our presentations. We would like to thank all of the presenters, and their co-authors for these really important and relevant conversations around both Maya and Creole culture. We will now open up the floor for our live question and answer segments from our audiences. So if anybody is listening in and has some burning questions, you still have time to put your questions and comments in the comment section, either on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll now welcome our presenters to the stream for the live question and answer segment. Hi, good morning, everybody. So I see we have Ms. Deidre on with her co-presenter, Mr. Joshua Humphreys. And then we also have Elodio Rash, I believe from the K.U.L.C.H.A Society, and Mr. Lee. So good morning to everybody. Thank you very much both for your presentations and for taking out the time to be here today for the question and answer segment. We will start with our questions on the YouTube end. So our first question is from Ms. Ella Bekeshi, and her question is directed to Mr. Lee and I guess to Mr. Rash. And it reads, what were some of the challenges you found when creating the movie?
Okay. Elodia, do you want to take that or should I?
Hey, sure. Thank you, Lee. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Great. Well, one of the challenges that our young people face in developing the digital media content is the storytelling. Most of our young people understands and knows the story, but to document it, to have it in a digital format is one of the challenges that our young people has faced. So that's one of the major challenges I noticed.
Thank you very much for that. I think this sort of ties into the previous conversations that we had, and even the previous questions that we had for our segment, our earlier segment, that sort of looks at what sort of engages or motivates the youth, but also that sort of incorporation of ICT and digital technologies into that wider conversation of not only cultural preservation, but cultural expression and sort of that aspect of agency, and really creating spaces and diverse spaces at that for people to share their expressions of self, of culture, and to sort of negotiate and develop that within these digital spaces or through these digital spaces. Um, I'm super interested, and again, jumping into this conversation more so, less so as a moderator, and more so through our interest in the different ongoing events and activities within our communities. This presentation actually sort of reminds me of some similar work that Dr. Filiberto Panados has done very recently through the Youth for Justice initiative, that pulled youths from Gales Point, I do believe from Blue Creek, and also from San Jose Socots, and looked very similarly at sort of envisioning their futures, and also identifying some of the challenges that sort of existed within their communities, and the life that that project has taken on its own. My sort of area of interest is also what future or additional plans they are to create more visibility for either these reels or the films, or sort of the content that is an outcome of these initiatives.
Well, the Julian.Cho Society is working closely with indigenous youth here in southern Belize, and our intention is to continue to develop more videos, reels, in amplifying the young people's voices. It's often seen that young people are not in the decision making. They're not there to voice their opinions. They're not there to voice their concerns. But we believe that through these digital platforms, that young people will be able to express their opinion, to express their concerns, so that these policymakers, so that these viewers can see the realities of what our indigenous youth are facing on the ground. So our young people are now focusing on many themes. They are focusing on environmental, on climate, on well-being, the community orientation. So there's a lot of topics that young people are focusing on. Like I mentioned, one of their challenges is that there's so much to think of, there's so much to do. And when they start to do one, the young people end up with 4 or 5 topics and they don't know which one to choose from. So focusing on one and developing a story behind it is one of their weaknesses, but we are using that to see how we can strengthen that. We're having mentors, we're having trainers for these young people so that they can become more advanced in creating videos and reels, so that they can start to amplify other young people's voices in their community.
I wouldn't see.
Could I add something as well?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Oh, and just in terms of the dissemination so far has been pretty impressive as well, because the videos that were made, that were posted on the Maya Leaders web Facebook page, some of them have already been watched by 20,000 people, which I mean, it's not just Belize, that's also reaching an international audience, but it's mostly Belize. So there's clearly a lot of interest in like young people's perspective on these things, and I think amidst all of the kind of controversy over land rights and things that are going on in the South, there's a need for more positive news stories coming out, and I think that a lot of people see these young people's viewpoints and the themes that they pick as something that everybody could get behind. And I think that's behind their popularity. And so with the reels going forwards, I think that those are going to be just trying to cater more to the short attention spans that people have in the context of all of this orange economy. I think that's something that's realized. And so making these high quality short pieces, we would hope that they're able to reach even more people.
Thank you very much for that, Lee. I going back to some of what Elodio had shared, I would say that having a lot of sort of thematic areas to choose from are maybe not so much challenges, but areas of opportunities, because you can see the potential for growth or the potential for more videos of this kind. So absolutely great work and great initiative. Perhaps for the viewers on the live, could you maybe share more about where these videos can be watched or where they can be accessed, or what social media sort of handles or websites people should be visiting or have at the top of their mind? And if you also would want to drop those later on, drop those in the comments, because some of our viewers might sort of be interested in visiting your either social media pages or websites.
Most of our videos that the young people have been creating is posted on the Maya Leaders of Southern Belize Facebook page.
All right, the MLA Maya Leaders of Southern Belize Facebook page. So do you guys have a YouTube channel as well?
We do have a YouTube, we do have Instagram, but Facebook is what is really active at the moment.
Yes. All right. I like to say that Belizeans tend to use Facebook the way other people use Google. So if it's on Facebook, at some point in time, somebody will see it. All right. Very good. Thank you so much for sharing. We do have a comment from Miss Odessa saying great presentation, thanks. And that's generally to the presenters on here. We also have a question from Miss Deetra. So Ms. Deetra, if you are on the call and if you would be okay with turning on your mic or sharing your video, the question for you reads, what are some of the challenges of researching these particular histories, especially as they have been harder to find in larger scholarship of the region? It seems that we've lost Ms. Deetra. Mr. Joshua, are you on the call? Would you want to take that question?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again, please?
Sure. The question reads, what are some of the challenges of researching these particular histories, especially as they've been harder to find in larger scholarship of the region?
Okay, great question. So, hello again, guys. Thank you all for the invitation, for having me. It's a pleasure, actually. I think one of the greatest challenges, as you mentioned, that many of our sources are secondhand sources. For example, me personally, I've never had the chance of visiting any historical archives. Maybe let's say Belize or Jamaica, Costa Rica, or even England. Most of my sources are articles that are written by historians. One of a historian that have contributed greatly to the history of Musketia, and mainly the Mosquito and the Creole creation of the Creole people is Carl Uffen. He's written this, many articles. So I think that's one of the main challenges, that I have not had the chance of visiting archives centers in person, but having to use articles written by other historians, if that answers your question.
Okay, I'm going to jump in now. Good afternoon, everyone. So for me, I've been doing this for 19 years, and I started from the individual aspect. So in researching, I am looking for specific names in addition to specific timelines. And I'm always in search of primary sources. For me, thankfully, at some of our archival departments, the officers are pretty versed in the records, so they've been very helpful. But I don't see it as a challenge. It's something that I enjoy doing. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for taking on this really important work. I believe that there's, not enough sort of discussions or scholarship about sort of early Creole culture or what that would have looked like in our sort of early formations of Belizean society and our cultures. And as you mentioned, there are, you sort of have to pull from archival records and sort of glean those aspects of it. Another area of opportunity I would like to think is sort of archaeological or sort of historical archaeological investigation of early Creole communities. So we do see some interest in archaeological investigations of the logging camps, the work by Dr. Alicia McGill-Ebbett, the work coming out of the Lamanai area and the Belize River Valley to sort of understand those periods through material culture, but also this important archival research being such an important and standalone component to add to that corpus of information. We have another question actually that's both to Ms. Deidre and to Mr. Joshua. Ms. Ella Bekeshi comments, great presentation. I guess she asks what historical sources can you suggest about the topic, which Mr. Joshua touched on a little bit, and yourself, but if there are other maybe historical sources that you might tell our Belizeans, these are the books that you need to look out for, or these are the resources that you need to look out for if you have an interest within this topic or area. And also, if you could talk about how easy or challenging it might be to access these sources.
I'll start, Joshua. So for me, it's not easy. Some archival offices you have to visit in person, which is very expensive when you're considering travel and accommodations and also one's personal time. As far as recommended books, I agree with Joshua and Dr. Carl often with his research on Musketia and Creole culture. Dr. Melissa Johnson has done some excellent work as well. For me, I'm more of a primary source person going through records, and a lot of our vital records are archived through the Mormon Church. The Catholic Church also has many vital records for baptismals, and that's within Guatemala, that's within Belize, and throughout the world. The Anglican Society also has some baptismal records as well. Some people are a little hesitant with records that are from the British or from the Spanish, but in Costa Rica, they have the most archival records from the indigenous group, which is the Mesquite. I'm due for a trip there to get more research, but that's just something I just wanted to share with the public, is that there are indigenous accounts, which is something that people are always in search for.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Very interesting, the comment on the Mormon Church. Do you find records also in the Baptist Church?
Baptist Church, there are books written that has information which I've traced some of our River Valley families to. Specifically, Crooked Tree, Lamanal, there were early churches established in the 1800s. And within those Baptist church records, many of our familiar River Valley names are mentioned. Jesuits, so I need to give them credit. At JARC, they have so much records and images of our early history as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Was there anything that you would like to add, Mr. Joshua?
Yes, I would like to add something to that. So I do. I'm the one behind the group that's called Musketeer Independence on Facebook. This is a Facebook group and also page. So in the group, I tend to upload articles, books, and even primary sources relating to the history of Musketeer. And within there, you can find mentions about the Creole people, or as I mentioned, we mentioned in the presentation, they were previously called Zambos. So you can visit those articles there. We have them uploaded in PDF files. So those are great sources for you to use. Yes, so I wanted to mention that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for the work that you do in this area. We have a couple other comments. Generally, we have Ms. Linda Serrell, who does work with ECOMAR and the St. George's Key. And St. George's Key, saying, enjoying both presentations. Thank you for recording the past and the present for the future. And then she has one final comment from Ms. Zitra that says, when will you publish your book? That she cannot wait to read it.
Oh, thank you for that. I do have my manuscript completed for over a year now, but I felt that some of the information was very personal because I'm disclosing how our families are connected and the history of our families. So I just felt I just don't want the information to be used for mischief. So I'm making some changes and then it will be released to the public.
Thank you. I guess we'll be on the lookout for that one, and have that sort of on top of our radar. All right. I do believe that rounds up the questions that are within the question and or sort of within the question and answer segment for today. I'm not seeing any more questions on Facebook and YouTube, but what I would like to do is sort of open up the floor to both sets of presentation for any sort of final words that you might have for our audience members or for our viewers or listeners. And also keeping in mind that this section will live permanently on our YouTube account and channel. But if there are any sort of final words, any call to actions, or any information that you would like to emphasize to our current or future viewers, please go ahead. Perhaps you can start with you, Lee, and maybe Mr. Elodio.
Yeah. So one thing I'd just like to reflect on with the whole experience of working with these young people is that they are, I mean, maybe for me, I'm 43, but I think I'm already surprised how adept young people are with learning technology. That was the quickest, fastest thing for them to learn, like, using videos, even all of the how to like frame videos and how to do the editing and everything. They learn that so quickly. And I think, as Elodio pointed out, if anybody was trying to repeat this process, like allocating more time for the creative process, like how to coax and encourage and nurture that kind of creativity is the biggest challenge. And the technological aspect is a minor thing by relatively. So if anybody else was doing something like this, that's the advice I would give. So yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Touching on that, and before you go, could you maybe give some advice about funding? As a very small NGO, funding to me is maybe always the sort of metric that is seen as something that can make or break maybe a project or an initiative. So maybe if you can, I don't know if you are able to share maybe your experiences with funding or your experiences with funding sources, either locally or internationally, or just around the general cost of some of these things. I have personally found, or looking at the Youth for Justice initiatives, cell phones and just cell phone video is quite sufficient for in many cases when it comes to doing some of these movies or digital. Like if it's a sort of lower end production, you can still get really, really great quality from that. And I think there is this perception that some of these things are costly. But there are definitely workarounds that can be done to get some fairly decent content created. So if you would want to take that conversation for just a little bit before we move to Mr. Elodio, that would be great.
Yeah, so as it happened for this project, we had a bit of funding, so we were able to get some, like, quote unquote nicer equipment, like some iPads, which the K.U.L.C.H.A Society now has to use for all of these different things. But the truth is that the participants used their own phones for some of the shots and some of the footage, and it was fine. And you know, young people, another thing like people of my age tend to be naive about is just how many young people have smartphones. Like almost all do now, and most of those smartphones take perfectly adequate videos. And so I would recommend not to get too bogged down in trying to find lots of money for equipment, and just to start with what you have available. And then as well with editing software, like we used the iMovie because it was on the same iPad, so it was convenient to do it on both things. But there is plenty of very good film editing software you can find online. There are free ones that, you know, you could also ask people who are good at finding things that aren't free if you wanted to, and those are perfectly adequate. They make really nice, really nice videos. So funding wise, yes, I mean, it's always a struggle to find funding. And I don't think that necessarily has to be a barrier if you have willing young people, and, you know, there's YouTube videos to tell you how to do all of this editing as well. So I would recommend that.
Thank you very much, Lee. YouTube University, as some people have said. Wonderful. Mr. Elodio?
Thank you. Our young people are very savvy to technology, and I see opportunities for young people in terms of not just only using technology to understand the transfer of knowledge from elders to young people, but it's also rooting to their culture, to where we come from, and also adapting to the modern technology. How can they advance? How can they amplify their voices without being at the forefront? So these are some of the opportunities that I see young people can use and make a good use of. And I hope and I encourage other young people, you know, to get involved. It is not only to, you know, voice concerns, but also to post positive things for people to understand who you are, what is your culture, because a lot of times people act on ignorance, people act on whatever they see as negative, but that's not the point. The point is that we do have a culture, we do have lands and territories where we live on and depend on. So this is one tool that young people can start to use so that others can understand the importance of them.
Thank you, thank you for that, Mr. Elodio. And also, again, thanks for sort of being on the front end of a lot of these, or of this project and initiative, and for that call to action. I'd like to go even further and say, while this is super, super important for, I guess, to envision what future you want to create for yourself as a person, and the aspect of empowerment that occurs with that this is something that is available to sort of all youths, in a sense, like that power or ability to envision a future and to document those areas and to sort of express it through video format is something that is available to any young person. So you might need to look at yourself and say, well, I'm not an Indigenous person, or I don't identify as Indigenous for whatever reasons, but you do have sort of oral histories or family histories that you can document. Perhaps it's a conversation with your grandmother or an elder within your community or a neighbor. So there is that aspect of sort of empowerment that can occur, by just involving yourself with anybody from your communities. And also sort of that call to action to any young person to become involved. I mean, we've had conversations about Maya communities, but also you see this among Filipino youth, this among Creole youth, that aspect of what are our futures that we want to see with ourselves. What can we learn from these different initiatives that are occurring around us, and how can we lend our voices to this? And with that, thank you very much, Ms. Elodie and Ms. Ali. We move over to Ms. Deidre.
Hi. I thoroughly enjoyed all the presentations thus far. And to expand upon what Mr. Rash said about us learning about our cultures and understanding our cultures, I think it's important for us to preserve these cultures. But most importantly, as Belizeans, is to understand how our cultures have interlapped and how they're connected. And to me, that's ultimately what the goal should be. We're not in competition with each other. We have so much to honor as Belizeans, and we're all connected, whether people acknowledge it or not. I know that for a fact from seeing records and DNA tests. I know that we're all connected. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deidre. Thank you. Mr. Joshua, hard act to follow, but the last word is for you.
Thank you, guys. So I also wanted to add to what everyone else is saying about we have to study more about our cultures and our connections. And as for the Creole people, I myself I'm a mixture of Garifuna and Creole, so I can it's really a mixture when it comes to me. And I think the Creole people of Musketia and Belize, we indeed need to embrace our cultures more, our identity as Creole people, right? I do not like the fact that the Creole people in the part of Musketia that is under the state of Nicaragua is considered ethnic communities. I do not like that term that they try to label on us. We are not ethnic communities. We are a people, which means that this is our homeland, right? So we need to embrace our identity more. For example, the Creole community of Musketia or the Musquitian territory estimates around 600,000 to 700,000 people, which is a huge population. So I just want to say we just need to embrace our identity more, study about our history, understand our connections. As Deidre mentioned, we are connected not only to the Miskito people, but many of us are connected to other indigenous people of Musketia and Belize. So it's very, very important for us to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua, both for the work that you do and for sort of representing the complexities of Miskita history and heritage through yourself so beautifully and through your work and support of what occurs in Belize. So thank you very much. There are a couple other comments. So Ms. Leisha saying great presentation. Dr. Cynthia Robbins saying thank you to all presenters for an informative morning session. And then we have Miss Odessa saying, giving out a shout out. Saying that it is Miss Debbie, sorry, actually from the St. George's Key Day Society. Again, thank you very much to all of our presenters for the morning sessions, and especially to our second panel, the persons here on the slide. That wraps up our question and answer segment. I see you, Ms. Deidre. You have some fans in here.
Thank you, everyone, for viewing, and thank you, Miss Sylvia, for this honor.
Absolutely. We are here to create spaces for our communities. Yes, and with that wraps up our morning session. Thank you to everybody and our viewers. We will be back live at 1 p.m. with our afternoon session that looks at the explores Belize's diverse, sustainable economy, orange economy. So we're looking more closely at the cultural and creative industries this afternoon. And we wish everybody a happy lunch. And we will have a new stream and a new link up on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page for our afternoon segment. And with that, thank you very much for keeping up with language, culture, heritage, and arts in Belize. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much. And we will see you this afternoon at 1 p.m. sharp.